AHLTA will soon be releasing a new version called 339. There are several new and upgraded features in this version, and this brief video will walk you through some of these changes. If you want more information, be sure to contact your local systems trainer. All patient data is from a training system and is not real. The first thing you'll notice when you log into AHLTA 339 is that the appointment list has changed by the addition of these filter icons located in the column headings. This is actually part of a much bigger change. You see, a lot of AHLTA had to be rewritten so that it would work on a computer running Windows 10. Now, most of this work won't be obvious to you, but this change did give us several small enhancements all by itself. The filter options here are but one example. Granted, we already had a good way of filtering what we see in the Appointments module, but if we flip over to the Previous Encounters, we see that we can filter the results here as well, and that just wasn't possible before. We'll now have the same option at the top of most column headings throughout the application, such as here in the Laboratory results and the Radiology results. Before leaving Previous Encounters, let me show you one other new feature called Unsigned Encounters. Many patients have encounters that, for one reason or another, have never made it to the Clinical Data Repository, or CDR. They are only viewable locally, which doesn't help when you see this patient at another MTF. An example is a note waiting to be co-signed. With this update, you'll now know that these unsigned encounters exist. It isn't a perfect system, and that you still won't know the content of that note if the visit wasn't at an MTF connected to your local host. For example, if you are working at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center and the patient has an unsigned note from Groton Branch Clinic, you'd see the clinic, provider, and the reason for visit, but not much else. However, if you are a primary care provider at Landstuhl and the cardiologist at Landstuhl hadn't finished their note, you could see what they've documented so far. You can even double-click on it to open it up from here, although you should probably only do that if it's your note. Last thing to note here is that with this Unsigned Encounters change, we can now see which MTF every note came from. So if I wanted to just see notes from Landstuhl, I can filter for that here. This is a great new feature. Switching back to the appointment list, let's look at a few other new features we can see from here. You'll notice that this patient has a special flag called EFMP next to the allergy icon. AHLTA 339 adds to the list of special flags that are available to assign to a patient. If we open up the Demographics module and then click on the Special Flags button, we can see the entire list of options. Some of these, like MRSA, VRE, and the behavioral health flags, were already available. But the list is expanding considerably with AHLTA 339. You need to have the correct key assigned to your account if you want to be able to add, edit, or remove these flags. Contact your local system shop if you think you need to be able to edit these. You can also add comments to these special flags, which can help communicate to other AHLTA users more details at a quick glance. The other thing you may have noticed from looking at the appointment list here is this VERT appointment. This is a new appointment type that blocks your clinic schedule to give you time to work on secure messages, answering TCONs, calling patients, and other administrative activity. There isn't a patient associated with these appointments, and there's no coding value either. It's simply a placeholder in your schedule. This VERT appointment can only be scheduled in CHCS by those that can already manage appointments. And if you are wondering what the rules are for using these VERT appointments, there were no DoD or service level policies when this video was created. Until there are, each site will have to best determine how to utilize this new capability. Let's now switch to the AP module to see a few more new features. There is one feature that impacts everyone who enters orders, and it deals with critical results. There is a new field, seen here when you click on the More Details button, and it stores a number that the pharmacy, lab, or radiology department can use to get a hold of the ordering provider if there's a critical result. It's a mandatory field, but it only needs to be entered once. This number doesn't get seen by the patient at all, so you don't have to worry about putting a private number in there. One smaller change comes to the AP module from the code rewrite we mentioned earlier. You see that the order entry screens now expand to fill the whole screen available. Compare that with what you see here in 338. This makes it much easier to, for example, read the reason for request here on the Consult tab. Another nice change here is that you can now hit Enter to put in line breaks when typing in your clinical impression. This is much better than it being the wall of text that you get today. Last thing to cover here in the AP module deals with patients with mental health disorders. We can now add the DSM-5 description of the diagnosis along with the ICD-10 code for these patients. Let's see how that works. Say I'm seeing a patient with depression caused by their abuse of alcohol. The DSM-5 tells me to use F10.24, which is a more generic alcohol dependence with alcohol-induced mood disorder. Previously, you would have had to type in the specific DSM-5 text into the free text area. With 339, that F10.24 diagnosis now gives me another line here called DSM-5 specifiers. Clicking on that, I can now choose the actual DSM-5 text for this disorder. There are multiple choices here because multiple DSM-5 diagnoses all map back to the single ICD-10 code. Choosing the correct one for my patient, I can even select the appropriate modifiers that are available in the DSM-5 for this particular diagnosis. Since I've clicked here to update the DSM-5 description to the patient's master problem list, you can see this text now here in the problem list in the AP module. It actually shows everywhere in AHLTA we see the problem list, like in the auto sites and here in the problem list. It can also be added, modified, and deleted here in the problem list as well. While I'm in the Problems module, let me point out one feature that has existed for a while, but is probably underutilized. Below the problem list is a section called Diagnosis History. Here you can see every diagnosis ever given to this patient, and for each of these diagnoses, you can see the associated encounters, medications, labs, tests, etc. It's a very useful feature. The next change will be a welcomed one for everyone that takes care of children. The pediatric growth charts are finally being updated to the World Health Organization versions where appropriate. You can see the source of each chart here when you pull them up. The last big change in 339 can be seen here in the immunization module. We have added a new column to tell you the number in the series for immunizations that are given in a series. Here we see this new column for all immunizations, with the number being 0 for any immunization that isn't given in a series. Of course, it's still important to validate that it's correct for any particular patient, but it should be a helpful aid. So these are the primary changes you'll see in AHLTA 339. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your local clinical systems trainer. Thank you for watching.